Hey guys, Michael here. So I'm back with a video just to demonstrate the rotary tool and actually engraving on a bottle the proper way this time. Before I do that though, there have been some questions that I've noticed in the Facebook group about when do you remove the base? When do you need to take the base out and use the risers? What does autofocus do? So I made a little SketchUp file and I want to share that with you now. And maybe it will help you understand that because you'll need to know that when you get to doing things like this. Let's step on over and I'll show you. All right, so here we are in my SketchUp model drawn of the xTool M1. Let's take a look inside and remove the front cover of this thing. And there we go. There's the inside of the M1. You have the back portion that has exhaust fan, camera, main motherboard. It's the gantry, the laser cutter head, and you have the wire loom off to the right. And see this piece of glass right here, this piece of opaque glass, that is a representation of the removable base plate. And what we want to focus on is this line right here. This is actually a not to scale view of the laser shooting downwards, right? So this yellow area represents the sweet spot or the capability of the laser where it can autofocus. If it's above this yellow line, it's too close to the laser head. It can't focus on that area. If it's below that yellow line, it's too far away from that laser head, so it cannot focus on that. So that's what you really want to keep in mind is there's a distance that it can focus on. Now, if you look at it from the base plate here, I believe the distance is 14 millimeters above the base plate and 14 millimeters below the base plate. That's the capabilities or the extents of that laser when you set the focus. Now, let's put some material inside the M1. So here we are looking at the base plate. I have some prisms on top of the base plate and material on top of that. If you put the material in there and you have that red light, that red laser on that piece of material and you set the autofocus, it will pass. And this is a visual representation of that pass because you can still see the yellow of the laser. That's saying it's still in the sweet spot of what the laser can do. So let's put some thicker material in there. So I added some thicker material on top of those prisms. Now I don't see the yellow. And what that means is when I put the material in there and do the autofocus is going to fail saying it's too close or too far away from the laser head, so it can't do it. The only way around that is, well, in this case, I'm going to just remove the prisms and see if that works. So with the prisms removed, it does meet that requirement. As you can see, there's a little bit of yellow in there. And if I did an auto measure against this material, it would pass and the laser would be able to work with this material. Now, what happens if we have even thicker material? So I have even thicker material here. So what I had to do was remove that base plate. See that little translucent glass there is gone because now it's sitting on the tabletop that the M1 is sitting on. And I still see that yellow. I'm still in the sweet spot area of what this laser can actually focus on. If this block were sitting on top of the prisms or sitting on top of the base plate, it would have been too tall. So now let's go with an even thicker piece of material you want to engrave on. All right, let me zoom in a little bit. Sorry if I'm making you seasick here. So here we have an even thicker piece of wood, and we've added our rotary tool and a bottle on top of that rotary tool. You can see these are way too tall compared to that focusable area of that laser. Now, how do you fix that? Well, you add risers. You're going to put material underneath the feet of the M1 to lift it up. Let's try lifting up this M1 and show you what happens here. So I'm going to lift the M1 up. So that's about the height of a normal riser that comes with the M1. As you can see now, we are able to focus on this material. If you set the material in and focus, it will pass. If it were back down, when you set the autofocus, it will fail because it's too tall, or you're actually literally going to hit this and it won't work either way. Now, when it comes to the rotary tool, you have to go even higher. So you're going to have to get it way up here to put it, oops, you're going to get way up here to put it in the sweet spot for that to work. So that's where the risers come into play, to lift this machine up to be able to work with that. So let's talk about risers for a second.
So I'm going to hold the camera for a little bit and just talk to you real quick about the risers for this. I'm using some 4x4 risers. That's because the bottle I'm using on that rotary tool is actually too high to use anything else on. I'll explain that tape in a minute. But I have all different kinds of methods to use for risers. I have the risers that came with the M1. However, I have some 2x4 scrap pieces that I cut. It's like 2x6s. And I have some 1x's. So these are about, 3/4 inch thick. This is 1 3/4 inch thick, and this is 3 3/4 inch thick. So I have my choice of whatever risers I need. If you have some old encyclopedias, whatever, you can put anything you want underneath here to lift it up to get whatever you're engraving within that quote unquote yellow area, that SketchUp thing that I showed you. So how do you know if it's right? Put that laser in the highest point of your piece you're going to cut or engrave on. Close the lid. Come over here, hit auto measure, and up here at the top is going to tell you if it was successful or not. It was successful, and it actually tells you the thickness that it measured is 0.368. That is in inches, and that 0.368 is not how thick that bottle is. It's actually how tall it is in reference to where the base would have been if the base were inserted into the unit. So before I get started more with the software, let's talk about this tape, because I did some tests on something. Let me show you what I did. Okay, so hopefully you can see this. I have some rolls of really thick cardboard. It's almost like Christmas wrapping paper cardboard, and I cut it in length so I can use it for testing. So I tested the software to make sure I did it right, but I also tested out this thing called framing. I'll show you that here in a second on the software, but this is what it looks like with and without the framing. So without the framing, I eyeballed it. I just guesstimated where I think it's going to go just by kind of looking at the laser, looking at the camera, and then figuring it out. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to fit it inside that tape, and it came pretty close, but then I used the framing feature of the software. The framing feature lets you fine tune it and move the bottle a little bit more left and right, rotate a little bit more to fit just right. So what I wanted to do is get as close to the tape as I could without getting too close. And as you can see, the width is much better than the without. So with the rotary tool, you can't rely on the camera. You really need to rely on the framing tool. The framing tool is going to really help you. I'm going to show you what that looks like on here. I have tape on my bottle because I don't want my logo to go any higher than that tape, and I don't want my logo to go any further to the left of this. I'm going to put this in here. I'm going to show you what the software looks like. Let's get to engraving.
Before I show you the framing portion of this and getting started with this engraving, let me show you what I did, the mistake I made in my original video last time. I kept it in this regular mode. I kept it set to laser flat. So what I should have done is actually drop this down and select laser cylindrical. When you do that, it rotates the whole screen 90 degrees, and now it has this line here going down the middle. The purpose of this line is it's going to start the engraving here, and I'm not sure if you can see this in my video here, but I have it set to rotate left because that's just a reminder for me that the bottle's going to rotate this way. And so the engraving is going to start here and it's going to go that way on the bottle. So if I import a drawing or my logo in there, and I want it to line up that logo against that line because it's going to engrave it this way. You don't want to put it on this side because it's not going to engrave on this side. It's going to rotate the bottle from right to left looking at the screen. So you want to make sure you have this in the light area, not the shaded area.
So I have my XCS software set in cylindrical, and then I have my logo in here. And then the logo, if I put it on here the way it is actually going to be upside down on the bottle. So let me rotate it 180 degrees. And I've already got the size I want it to be. So let's put it as close to that line as possible and close to this blue line. So I could hit go and see what happens. However, I don't want to do that. What I'm going to use is the framing feature. Well, let's check out the framing. So how do you do the framing? All you do is hit start. When this preview comes up, you can hit the framing button. So when you do that, it's going to send it to the M1. Now it's waiting for you to hit the button on the M1. Let me take the camera down and try to show you exactly what the framing does and what I'm going to need to do to adjust my bottle to fit where I want the engraving to be. So I'm hitting the button now. You see that right there? That's where it's going to engrave. So I'm really far off to that blue line of where I need it to be. So how do you fix that? Well, I'm going to need to rotate my bottle. So I'm going to rotate my bottle and do it again.
A few moments later.
Okay, so thanks to the framing feature, I actually had to make some adjustments because the bottle was moving and not doing what I need to do because the bottle's not round. So that framing actually saved the bottle from being messed up. So again, one more time on the framing, I have my image, my logo here, and I'm going to click on start. And instead of hitting send like you normally would, just hit framing and come back to the M1, hit the button, and it'll show you exactly what it's going to do, the outside perimeter of it. So I think that's going to work really well. All I have to do next is double check everything. I have it set to cylindrical, and obviously this is 90 degrees now, so it's obvious that it's cylindrical and doing a different mode than normal. And I have my power and my speed and my lines per centimeter. I'll show you what settings I'm using on this particular bottle. I'm going to hit start, and I'm going to hit send, and I'm going to cross my fingers that this comes out okay. And away we go. Okay, I got it all finished up. As you can see there, it looks pretty ugly. That's because there's some burn marks around there you have to clean off. So I have a little shop towel here with some isopropyl alcohol. And let me just clean it up real quick. Hot dog. That looks really good. I'll see if I can get a better picture of it for you, but it looks really clear. There we go. Just came out good. Just came out real good. That took way longer than I thought it would. The framing is a huge help. If I had not used the framing, my image would have been too big and I wouldn't have known it, and it would have been lopsided. Now, I did struggle with this bottle a little bit because this bottle has a flat spot here and a flat spot here. That's why I couldn't go too far on the rotary tool, and I struggled a little bit on that. And plus, it's actually tapered, so that was another issue. So it was at an angle, and I can only go so far. Framing tool definitely helps. So let me know in the comments, what do you want to see next? I am mostly focused on engraving and cutting, as you can tell. But yeah, let me know what else you'd like to see, and hopefully that little SketchUp thing helped you understand when do you need to remove the base, when do you need to use the risers. It's all about that sweet spot, that little yellow area of the laser. Now, it's not visually yellow or anything, but that's what the auto measure is for. And if it's within that range, it's successful, it'll work fine. But if it's not, it'll tell you it's too high or too low and you need to adjust it. So again, risers can be whatever you want. Wood blocks, old encyclopedias, the risers that came with the M1, whatever you need to do to lift the M1 up. I appreciate you guys watching. See you next time.